John, I wonder if we've heard numbers of several hundred Americans who are in Gaza, up to 600. Do you have a more specific number of the actual number of Americans who are in Gaza right now?
State Department is a better place to go for that.
So
Several hundred I know is accurate. I wish I could be more detailed than that, but you really got to go to state. They would have a better count probably than I would.
And then in the prudent planning process, I mean, for these several hundred Americans who are in Gaza right now, if it's in a prudent planning stage,
Please don't mix up the two. What the question I was getting was on the Washington Post report about regional evacuation planning. We are actively trying to get Americans out of Gaza. Ambassador Satterfield was appointed for that purpose, well, also to get humanitarian assistance in, and we're doing that. But we know there's Americans in there. We know they want to get out. We're working very hard to find safe passage for them. That is different than a non-combatant evacuation operation. That's safe passage out of a war zone.
Is there a current, advice, I guess, for folks who are kind of trying to gather near the Rafah crossing in case that is where they would evacuate? Is it advisable for Americans in Gaza right now to be in a certain location?
I got this question yesterday, and I really should refer you to the State Department. They manage and handle our communication with American citizens overseas, and I think it's better for that question to be posed to them.
Matt, you have the last question.
Thank you. John, I wanted to make sure that I understood the idea of a ceasefire versus a humanitarian pause. You guys clearly are opposed to a ceasefire, thinking that would be a victory for Hamas. But on the humanitarian pause, is it something that the U.S. is actively pursuing or calling for that to be the case?
Well, you heard the Secretary of State talk about the need to look at that, to consider the possibility of a humanitarian pause, to allow aid to get in and get in unfettered, and to allow for the safe movement of people out. But again, there's a lot that goes into that, Matt. We got the Rafah crossing's open on the way in. It's not open on the way out. There's a lot of spade work in diplomacy to get that to happen.
So you're not calling for it at this point. You're saying it should be an option.
I think it's again. I would refer you back to what Secretary Blinken said, but it's certainly something that ought to be considered for the purpose of humanitarian assistance.
Okay. And then one last thing on the 10 Americans that are unaccounted for. Is there any confirmation that some number of those are currently being held hostage, or is it completely that the U.S. has no idea where those people are?
No, the fact that they're unaccounted for means we truly don't know. We know, again, as I said, a handful, less than 10, are being held hostage. But when we give you the number of unaccounted for, and the reason that number goes up and down is because you get information. Sometimes it's really bad news. Sometimes it's not. So that number fluctuates. It hasn't fluctuated much over the last several days. It's hung around 10, 11. Today it's 10. But what I can tell you is we're working real hard to try to solve those mysteries, and so that the number's zero, and at least families know, at least they have information, and we're working hard on that. All right, thank you.